I still remember the morning I walked into that office for the very first time. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought everyone could hear it. It was a mix of excitement and nerves. I had landed a job I had dreamed about for years, and finally, I was stepping into a place that could change everything for me. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder, took a deep breath, and tried to calm the swirl of thoughts in my head. "You can do this, Alec," I whispered to myself, forcing a smile even though my palms were sweating. The office was bright, filled with the quiet hum of computers and the faint smell of fresh coffee. People moved quickly, talking softly to each other, their steps careful, as if they were rehearsing for some invisible play. I nodded at a few faces, trying to seem confident, but inside, I felt small, almost invisible. My first day should have been ordinary, routine even, but I had no idea that nothing about that day would ever feel ordinary again. It was when I saw him for the first time that everything began to shift. He was tall, calm, with a quiet air of confidence that I couldn't quite understand. He wasn't dressed like a CEO. No flashy suits, no ostentatious jewelry, just simple clothes, the kind someone in IT might wear. I assumed he was just another technician, someone who fixed computers, answered questions, and slipped back into the shadows. Little did I know how wrong I was. The first week passed with small, almost imperceptible encounters. He helped a colleague with a printer issue, offered a gentle smile to the receptionist, and occasionally glanced at me, though I wasn't sure if he noticed me at all. But even the briefest moments made my chest race, a flutter I couldn't explain. I tried to push it aside, telling myself it was just the thrill of a new environment. But there was something about him, something magnetic, something that made the air feel heavier when he was near. Life in the office wasn't simple, though. There was a tension I couldn't shake. Whispered conversations would stop whenever he entered a room. People would glance at each other, then quickly look away. Rumors floated in hushed tones, stories of secret meetings, of decisions that could make or break careers. I didn't understand it, but I felt the weight of it, like an invisible wall surrounding him, keeping everyone else at a distance. I started noticing the small things, the careful way people spoke, the polite but distant smiles, the sudden quiet whenever he appeared. Then came my first real challenge. A simple mistake, filing a report under the wrong category, turned into a humiliation I hadn't expected. My supervisor's sharp eyes cut into me like knives. Colleagues exchanged stifled laughs, and my cheeks burned. I had always worked hard, followed every rule, and done everything I could to be competent. And yet, in that moment, I felt powerless, judged for something so minor. The unfairness of it made my stomach twist, my hands tremble, and my mind spin with questions I had no answers to. And then he was there, calm, silent, observing. For a moment, the room seemed to pause. His gaze landed on me, and it wasn't judgmental. It was almost protective. I felt seen in a way I had never been before. It was confusing, comforting, and terrifying all at once. Who was this man, really? Why did he seem so different from everyone else, yet so untouchable? My curiosity grew, and I found myself thinking about him constantly, even when I knew I shouldn't. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern repeated. I would catch glimpses of him, small moments that felt charged with meaning. A fleeting smile across the office, a gentle nod when no one else was watching. It was subtle, almost impossible to notice if you weren't paying attention. But I noticed, and it made my pulse race every time. I told myself it was nothing, just imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. One afternoon, I overheard a snippet of conversation that made my heart stop. 2 colleagues were talking about him, using words that didn't make sense to me at first. Millionaire, CEO, influential. My mind refused to accept it. That quiet, calm man, the one I assumed was just another employee like me. He was at the top of the company, the one whose decisions shaped everything I was trying to survive. I felt like I had walked straight into a dream, only it wasn't a dream. It was real. Everything I thought I knew about him, about myself, about my place in this office, shifted in an instant. The magnetic presence, the quiet confidence, the way he seemed to notice me without anyone else understanding. It all made sense now. And yet, I felt a strange fear. How could someone so powerful ever notice someone like me? How could someone so untouchable see me as anything more than a mistake, a minor distraction in his carefully ordered world? Even as I tried to focus on my work, my thoughts kept drifting back to him. The tension, the curiosity, the unspoken questions, they all intertwined, creating a storm I couldn't calm. Every step I took in that office felt like walking a tightrope. I was learning a new world, one of hidden power and invisible rules, and I didn't yet know how to navigate it. But I also knew that my life had already changed in ways I couldn't yet understand. And so, I kept going, day after day, feeling a mixture of fear, excitement, and a strange hope that I couldn't name. I didn't know it then, but the misunderstanding, the moment I assumed he was just a technician, was about to set off a chain of events that would challenge everything I thought I knew about trust, love, and the world itself. By the end of that first month, I realized one thing clearly. Nothing in my ordinary life would ever be ordinary again. Everything had shifted. The rules, the expectations, and the invisible lines I thought were safe. And all of it had started with a single, innocent mistake. After that first month, everything in the office felt different, though nothing had officially changed. I tried to keep my routine, to focus on my work, but I couldn't escape the way my mind kept returning to him, the man I had mistakenly assumed was just another employee, when in reality, he was the CEO, the one whose decisions could ripple across the company and affect hundreds of lives. The truth hit me like a wave I wasn't ready for, and yet, I couldn't look away. Every day brought subtle reminders of the invisible power he held. Meetings that I wasn't part of, whispered discussions in hallways that stopped when he appeared, and the careful deference everyone gave him without even thinking. And there I was, just a new secretary, trying to navigate this maze, feeling both terrified and captivated. I had never felt so small in my life, and yet, strangely, so aware. The more I watched him from afar, the more I realized he wasn't like the others. He didn't command attention with arrogance or loudness. His presence was quiet, but undeniable. Even when surrounded by people, it felt like he existed on a different plane, calm in a way that made everyone else jittery. And when our eyes met, even for a fleeting moment, it was as if the rest of the office disappeared. My pulse would spike, my hands would sweat, and a strange warmth would creep through me. I told myself it was foolish, that I couldn't possibly matter to someone like him. But the moments kept coming, and my heart refused to listen to reason. Then, the tension in the office began to grow in ways I hadn't anticipated. Some colleagues, I realized, were wary of me, not because of my work, but because of him. Their glances, brief but loaded, made me feel as though I was being watched, judged for reasons I didn't yet understand. It wasn't just the hierarchy of the office. It was something more subtle, more insidious. I felt the unfair weight of expectation and unspoken rules pressing down on me, and I began to understand how easily someone could be dismissed or underestimated in a world like this. One afternoon, it all came to a head. I had made a small mistake. One of the files I was responsible for hadn't been properly updated. Nothing serious, nothing irreparable. But my supervisor didn't see it that way. The scolding was harsh, the stares piercing. I felt the sting of embarrassment, the sharp twist of injustice. My cheeks burned, my stomach knotted, and I wanted to shrink into the floor. I had never felt so powerless, and yet I knew I had to stand my ground. And then he appeared, out of nowhere, calm, silent, observing. He didn't speak at first, just looked. And somehow that gaze made everything else, the whispers, the stares, the humiliation, fade into the background. For the first time, I felt seen not for my mistake, but for me. The recognition was overwhelming. It was confusing, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Why would someone like him care? Why would he notice me in a world where I was supposed to be invisible? As the days passed, the incidents grew more complex. I started noticing subtle acts of kindness. He would leave notes on my desk to encourage me, quietly fix a problem without making a fuss, always at a distance, always unnoticed by others. But the more I tried to focus on my work, the more I found myself watching him, thinking about him, imagining what it would be like if he saw me. Not just as an employee, not as a mistake, but as someone he could trust, someone he could notice without the barrier of status and hierarchy. Yet, just as I started to feel a fragile sense of connection, the office's invisible walls reminded me of the harsh reality. I overheard conversations about scandals, about power plays that could ruin careers in an instant, about people being judged and dismissed before they had a chance to defend themselves. It was intoxicating and terrifying, a world I had stepped into without realizing its dangers. And through it all, he remained a constant, a calm presence in the storm, but always distant, always untouchable in ways I couldn't yet understand. Then came the day that changed everything. I overheard a conversation, casual, almost careless, that revealed the full truth. My heart stopped. The man I had assumed was just a technician, the quiet figure who had captured my curiosity and stirred feelings I didn't want to admit, was not just anyone. He was the CEO, the millionaire, the man whose every decision shaped the company, the employees, and the very life I had just begun to navigate. The revelation hit me like a punch to the chest, leaving me breathless, disoriented, and strangely, exhilarated. I realized that every small interaction, every glance, every fleeting moment I had shared with him carried a weight I hadn't imagined. The office, once familiar, now felt like a stage where I had no script, and yet, somehow, I was at the center of a drama that had been unfolding long before I arrived. Fear, excitement, confusion, and longing swirled inside me, creating a storm that I couldn't calm. My ordinary life had collided with a world of power, secrecy, and unspoken rules, and there was no turning back. In the following days, the tension only grew. I found myself navigating a labyrinth of office politics, whispers, and invisible expectations, trying to keep my footing while my heart pulled me toward him. Every encounter left me more captivated, more terrified, and more aware of the distance that separated us, not just in the hierarchy of the office, but in the invisible walls of social expectation, power, and privilege. I had glimpsed a world that was not mine, yet I was drawn to it in ways I could neither blame nor resist. By the end of this chapter of my life, I understood one thing clearly. Nothing would ever be the same. A single, innocent mistake, thinking he was just a technician, had set off a chain of events that would challenge everything I thought I knew about trust, attraction, power, and the invisible barriers that shape our lives. And deep down, I knew that the story was just beginning, that the real tests, the moments that would push me to my limits, were still ahead. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope over a chasm I couldn't see the bottom of. Every step I took in the office was measured, careful, because now I knew the reality of the world I had stepped into. It wasn't just about work anymore. It was about power, influence, and the invisible rules that no one ever explained. And in the center of it all was him, the man I had assumed was just a technician, the man who was, in truth, the CEO. Every glance in his direction sent my heart racing. I tried to focus on my tasks, to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the more I watched him, the more I realized there was a side to him no one else seemed to see. He was calm, composed, and effortlessly commanding. Yet there was a subtle kindness in the way he interacted with those around him. Small gestures that seemed invisible to everyone else, but that I noticed, that I couldn't ignore. And every time he looked at me, even briefly, I felt as though a door had opened into a world I wasn't supposed to enter. Yet the office was unforgiving. Jealousy and suspicion lurked behind polite smiles. Colleagues whispered in corners, their eyes flicking toward me whenever he appeared. I could feel their judgment, their quiet assessments of who I was, what I was doing, and why I seemed to matter in ways they didn't. I had entered this world as an outsider, and despite the subtle connection I felt with him, I was painfully aware that my position was fragile, that one misstep could unravel everything. Then came an incident that shook me to my core. I had been working late, trying to correct a minor error in a report, when one of my colleagues walked past, smirking. "You think you belong here," she whispered under her breath. "But you're just lucky he noticed you." Her words stung, and for a moment, I froze, my confidence collapsing like a house of cards. The humiliation, the injustice, it was almost too much to bear. But just as panic began to rise, he appeared. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold or reprimand. He simply stood beside me, calm, observant, a steady presence in the storm. The way he looked at me, it wasn't pity, and it wasn't condescension. It was recognition. It was understanding. And somehow, it gave me strength. A fragile, trembling courage to stand my ground in a world that seemed determined to make me feel small. From that moment on, the tension between us shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the quiet power he wielded, and the way he saw me differently from everyone else. I wanted to reach out, to say something, to let him know I noticed him too, but I was terrified. I didn't know if it was safe to bridge the gap between us, if it was possible for someone like me to exist in his world without being crushed by the weight of it. And then came the moment that changed everything. I overheard a conversation between two colleagues that left me breathless. They mentioned his full title, the scale of his wealth, the influence he held, not just over the company, but over entire industries. My mind reeled. The man I had admired, the man who had unknowingly captured my attention and stirred feelings I couldn't explain, was untouchable, a force far beyond my reach. And yet, the way he had noticed me, protected me, and treated me differently, it contradicted everything I thought I knew about power. The revelation left me dizzy, my emotions tangled in a confusing mess of awe, fear, and longing. I realized that every subtle smile, every small act of kindness, every quiet glance was loaded with meaning I hadn't yet understood. And at the same time, I felt the crushing weight of reality, the impossibility of my situation, the invisible barriers between us that no one else could see, but that I could feel with every fiber of my being. Days turned into a week, and each encounter, each fleeting moment, became more intense. The office, once a place of routine and order, now felt like a labyrinth of unspoken rules and hidden dangers. I learned to read the subtle signs, who to avoid, when to speak, when to stay silent. But through it all, he remained a constant, a calm presence in a storm I couldn't escape. And every time our eyes met, it was like a jolt of electricity, a reminder of the world I had stepped into and the impossible connection that had formed between us. Then one afternoon, everything came to a head. A colleague, envious and suspicious, tried to humiliate me publicly, suggesting that I had overstepped boundaries, that I was pretending to be something I wasn't. My heart raced, my palms were sweaty, and for a moment, I felt like the entire office was watching me crumble. I didn't know what to do, where to look, or how to defend myself. Fear and helplessness threatened to swallow me whole. But then he stepped forward, quietly, calmly, and with a presence that demanded attention. He placed himself between me and the judgment. The whispers died down, the stares shifted, and I realized, in that instant, that he was protecting me, not because I was perfect, not because I had earned it in the eyes of others, but because he saw me for who I truly was. I felt a wave of gratitude, awe, and something deeper that I couldn't yet name. As the office returned to its rhythm, I stood there, trembling, but aware of a new reality. He wasn't just the CEO. He wasn't just a figure of power. He was someone who could see through the facade, someone who could notice a small, quiet person like me and treat her with respect, even in a world that seemed designed to dismiss and belittle. And for the first time, I felt that my own courage, my own resilience, mattered. Yet despite the growing connection, the tension, the fear, and the excitement, I knew the real test was still ahead. The journey that had begun with a simple mistake, thinking he was just another employee, was far from over. I had glimpsed a world that was beyond my reach, yet I was drawn to it in ways I couldn't explain. And deep down, I sensed that the coming days would test not only my feelings for him, but my strength, my judgment, and my ability to survive in a world where appearances could be deceiving, and every moment carried consequences I couldn't yet foresee. I never imagined a single day could hold so much tension, so much uncertainty. That afternoon, everything I had been trying to navigate, the unspoken rules, the office politics, the subtle judgments, came crashing down all at once. I was at my desk, trying to focus on a report, my hands shaking just slightly when I felt it, the weight of every eye in the office on me. I didn't know what I had done wrong this time, but the silence around me was suffocating. Then I saw her, a colleague who had made no secret of her envy, step toward me, a smirk playing on her lips. She leaned in just enough for me to hear, whispering in a tone that was all venom. "You really think you belong here, don't you? You're just lucky he noticed you." My heart stopped, my stomach twisted, my cheeks flushed, and my mind raced. How dare she? Who gave her the right to make me feel so small, so exposed? I wanted to shrink, to disappear, to run out the door and never come back. But before I could even move, I felt it. A presence beside me, calm, unshakable. He was there, stepping forward with a quiet authority that made the office seem to freeze in place. The smirk on her face faltered. The whispers died down, and for the first time I realized just how powerful he truly was, not just in title or wealth, but in presence, in the ability to shift the energy of a room with nothing more than a step forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His gaze, steady and unyielding, pinned her in place. And then he looked at me, really looked at me. And in that moment, I felt something I had never felt before. Recognition, not pity, not judgment, but understanding. It was as if he saw everything I had been feeling, everything I had been trying to hide, and he acknowledged it without a word. My emotions collided in a storm. Relief, awe, fear, and an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. Here was the man who had unknowingly captivated my thoughts, the one I had assumed was just a technician, standing by me in a way that made me feel both protected and exposed. My chest ached, my hands trembled, and my mind raced. How could someone so untouchable notice me in a world that seemed determined to dismiss and judge? The tension didn't end there. Over the next few days, the office felt like a battlefield. Every interaction was a test, every glance charged with meaning I could barely comprehend. He was always present, calm, observing, yet never overbearing. And yet, his attention, even when subtle, made everything feel amplified. The whispers, the judgments, the hidden envy lurking in every corner. I realized that I was no longer just navigating my own fears. I was navigating a world that existed far beyond my understanding, a world he occupied naturally, and I was trying desperately to find my place in it. Then, the revelation that would shake me to my core came crashing down. I overheard a casual conversation between two colleagues, the kind that seemed harmless until the words hit me. "He's the CEO, Alec. The real CEO," one said, almost in passing. My heart leapt into my throat. The man I had admired from afar, the one whose every small action had seemed so human and gentle, was not what I had assumed. He wasn't just a quiet technician. He was the leader, the millionaire, the untouchable figure whose every decision shaped the lives of everyone around him. I couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the edge of my desk as disbelief, awe, and a strange, thrilling fear collided inside me. Every glance, every small act of kindness he had shown me, every subtle smile, I had misread it, yet somehow I hadn't. I felt an impossible mix of emotions, the thrill of being noticed by someone so extraordinary and the crushing awareness of the gap between us, a gap that seemed impossible to bridge. The next day, it happened again. A minor error on my part was suddenly used as ammunition by those who envied me. I felt the walls closing in, the fear of public humiliation gripping me with icy fingers. And then he stepped forward, calm, silent, observant. The room seemed to shrink around us, the whispers silenced by the gravity of his presence. My colleague faltered, caught in the undeniable authority of someone far beyond her reach. When his eyes met mine, I felt a jolt that left me breathless. I understood then that this wasn't about power in the traditional sense. It was about recognition, about being seen in a world that too often looked away. I realized how rare, how profoundly moving it was to have someone acknowledge your existence in a place designed to dismiss you. And in that acknowledgement, I felt a surge of something I had tried to ignore. Connection, attraction, something far deeper than mere admiration. But fear lingered. I was aware of the boundaries, the invisible rules, the danger of missteps in a world that moved on power, status, and appearances. I had glimpsed a world far beyond my own, a world he inhabited with ease, and I was painfully aware of how small and fragile my place in it seemed. Every interaction became charged with meaning. Every glance carried unspoken weight. I couldn't predict his intentions, and I didn't yet understand the consequences of my own feelings. By the end of that week, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, yet unable to stop thinking about him. The office, once a place of routine, had become a stage for life-altering realizations. I had learned about envy, power, judgment, and the invisible barriers that separate people in ways we rarely see. And I had discovered that sometimes, a single moment, a glance, a gesture, a recognition, can change everything. And in the quiet of my thoughts, I asked myself a question I couldn't yet answer. How does someone like me, an ordinary girl caught in an extraordinary situation, survive in a world ruled by people like him? And more than that, could what had begun as a simple misunderstanding, the day I assumed he was just a technician, be the start of something far beyond my imagination? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew this. My life had shifted irreversibly, and nothing, not fear, not envy, not the rules of the office, would ever make me forget the storm of emotions, the awe, and the impossible reality I had just stepped into. The days after that week felt almost unreal, like I was walking through a world that had shifted just slightly out of place. The office, which had always felt structured, predictable, and small, now seemed layered, full of hidden currents and unspoken rules I was only beginning to understand. And through it all, he remained a quiet constant, observing, protective, and impossibly present without ever being overwhelming. I realized that the small connection we had built, starting from what I had thought was a simple misunderstanding, had grown into something extraordinary. He had noticed me when no one else had acknowledged me when the world seemed determined to dismiss or underestimate me, and had quietly given me strength without demanding anything in return. I felt seen in a way I had never experienced before. But more than that, I began to see myself differently. I understood the courage it took to step into a world that felt too large, too powerful, and too intimidating. I realized the importance of resilience, of standing tall, even when the odds were stacked against you. The mistakes, the whispered judgments, the moments of fear and doubt, they had all shaped me into someone who could navigate challenges with awareness, confidence, and even hope. The office, with its invisible hierarchies and subtle injustices, reflected a world far bigger than me. I thought about all the people who had been underestimated, dismissed, or judged unfairly, simply because others had assumed they were less than they were. I understood, more deeply than ever, that appearances could be deceiving, that power and worth are not always obvious, and that the smallest moments of recognition can transform lives in ways no one expects. Through it all, I discovered that courage and empathy could bridge gaps that seemed impossible. The quiet glances, the subtle gestures, the recognition of a person's humanity in a world that often turns a blind eye, they mattered. And I carried that lesson with me, understanding that true influence is not just about wealth or status, but about seeing, acknowledging, and protecting the dignity of others. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I couldn't help but wonder, how many people go through life being judged unfairly, dismissed, or misunderstood? How many times do we miss opportunities for connection, for love, for understanding, simply because we see only what we expect to see? The story of my own experience became more than a personal journey. It was a reflection of the world around me, a reminder that empathy and courage can change the course of someone's life in ways we may never fully understand. In the end, I realized that the misunderstanding, the day I assumed he was just another technician, was not a mistake at all. It was the beginning of a story I could never have predicted. A story that revealed the power of recognition, the depth of courage, and the beauty of unexpected connection. My life had shifted, irrevocably and profoundly, because someone had chosen to see me, not as a mistake, not as a lesser, but as a person worthy of attention, care, and respect. And as I stepped into this new chapter, I carried more than just the memory of him. I carried the knowledge that we all have the ability to notice, to acknowledge, and to protect the dignity of others. That one small act of recognition can change the trajectory of someone's life. And I carried the understanding that the invisible walls around us, prejudice, assumptions, envy, fear, can be dismantled, one act of courage, empathy, and awareness at a time. So I ask you, as I look back on everything, how often do we judge before we truly understand? How many opportunities for love, connection, or transformation do we miss because we assume we know the truth at first glance? My story isn't just mine. It's the story of countless others who face invisible walls every day, who are underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. And the question is this: how many more lives could change if we simply took the time to see? Because that is what happened to me. I was noticed, I was acknowledged, and my life shifted in ways I could never have imagined. And perhaps, if we all dared to notice the world a little more deeply, to recognize the humanity in each person around us, the world itself might begin to change.
Think about it. Could this happen to you? Some stories aren't just heard, they're felt. Behind every truth, there's a hidden fear. This story won't just shake your mind, it'll haunt your soul. Who could imagine the truth would be this terrifying? The story ends, but the questions stay alive.